It's the same as last time. There's one person. That might just be us. You're on.
If you like me, well, I don't mind, girl. You know this night beat. I finally well, I said, what man? Understand, I got double like phones and that mic stand. Keep shaking, money making. Street to beat that's so heartbreaking. Close the body, the original deep garage. And you walking on me, you're chilling around. This is the daytime, it's the daytime. It's the gotta make your money in the daytime. This is the nighttime, it's the right time. It's the nighttime, it's the daytime. It's the daytime, it's the daytime. It's the nighttime, it's the right time. It's my time, street light in the night. In the night.
Anya's in here. Hi, Anya. Hell yeah. I hope it's warmer in Rhode Island.
I don't think it is.
It's probably not.
No.
It's not.
not.
No. It's fucking cold here. Well, we have cider. Yeah,
She's like, friends.
I know. Let's all pray it doesn't rain.
Good stuff.
Hello, hello. For anyone on Zoom, we'll be getting started shortly. Thank you.
Hello.
Oh, I see.
Hello, hello everybody who is here despite the cold weather and possibility of rain. And thank you to everybody who's on Zoom tuning in. This is the second day of the Unpublishable book launch. And so we'll have a few more readers from the book. Eitan here has a copy. I'm Chris Molnar, and this is Eitan Eshin.
Yeah.
And we're the editors of Unpublishable.
Yeah. So, should we start?
Yeah.
So we introduce our first reader.
Let's see go see who we have first. First is Liz Janoff, who is reading for Charlie Dyroff, who couldn't make it, who is reading for Jean Fraser, who couldn't make it. Right. Liz Janoff holds a BFA from NYU and is currently a graduate student at Hunter College.
Hi. Thanks, Nick and Chris, for having me. So I'm going to read a few short poems. A title of a retrospective I like is Flowers and Questions. At an event, an audience member calls the central image of a book a nucleus. At another event, a woman describes it as a festering wound. At the Botanical in April, the garden is still a path of thorn bushes. The point of a city is a question of scale. The Hudson Yards became a measure of distance when I misread part of a sentence, 100 yards from the house as 1 Hudson yards from the house. Inauspicious New Year's error walking. I meant to say my sock fell down. Instead I said my stock fell down. Especially wet New Year's before party arguing about whether or not it was raining. Gusty out, text received. Well, we're close to the river. Don't look at your phone. I'll just read aloud every address until you think it's the right one. This is my New England poem. Thick green highway foliage, end of summer goes fast. Boats today, docked like tombstones. I see it. A boat named Little Fellow in italics. I want to say something to New England. Dear New England, here they are, our prizes. Plastic dice, a speckled stone. We hold them to honor a famous statue and all the people that died in shipwrecks 1623 to 1923. An article on the usefulness of lists, soft colors, a soft pink towel, peach shampoo, the kind of friendship that comes all at once, strong and hypnotic. The white stuff of the wave is hypnotic, she said. It's endearing, this wooden restaurant named after a captain with the worst fish and chips in Massachusetts. I like how the PBS segment on black holes confirmed the dangers of gravity and porousness. Did the universe break away from another universe, like leaving the city for the country? There's an eastward shift in the air. When a friend calls, he's leaving Texas for New Hampshire. I say, okay, that's definitely what you should do. At night again, the existence problem. You're resting your head on my stomach. You have a headache, and I promise, I'm learning to tend to all ailments. I say, don't worry, drink the coldest water you possibly can. I say, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. So, see-through winter trees reveal thick highways, past the Jackie Robinson 3 times to get to park. Would be better with foliage, the kind of name I like for a parkway. A walk can be a project. Stop for $2 cappuccino special in January. Walk leads to undiscovered skate park. Spring, winter, sun, weather is fraudulent. Highway with 100 songs for my head. Can't talk about anything other than signage. The sign for piece of pizza, Seagate Fish Market for rent, your fave mini mall, crowded cemetery hills. We laugh at what looks like Europe. Margarita bar, great laundromat. If we lived here, then what would we be far from? So just 2 more. Writers obsessed with devotion. Can't best practices be casual? You don't need more space, money, materials. Flirt with several vocations until you become indistinct, airy, and young. Sunlight caressing strands of hair on your face, age 90-something. Have you ever considered that you're working too hard on your album? And the last one. Scanning through a notebook, looking for a note I don't find, come across one that just says New York radio jazz, the kind of jazz I like, the kind that happens to be on any NY jazz station with a little extra frequency. We listen to while driving around near Jamaica looking for parking and admiring single family homes. Let's just eat in the park, Nick says, and I'm like, sure, but I have to pee, so he guards the path for me. The park is mellow and I say, don't fall asleep. It's hard not to talk about the times, and I didn't say not to, but I know we're both really trying. Instead, we'll walk the paths and look for trees, any that don't look like the kind we're used to. I can't believe this fauna. What kind of bird do you think that is? We're on a rare animal streak. Yesterday, a yellow python held by a Petco employee. I asked a friend what it means, and he said, be patient. Thank you.
Our next reader, welcome back, Nicodemus Nicoludis, the founding editor of Archway Editions.
All right. I'm going to read slower today. That's my promise to you who saw me yesterday. Okay. Well, and let's see. I don't know where it is, but what are these? Okay. Here. I hold in my hands only a small area of this world from time to time, making my presence known from the light I produce, the dollars I spent on rent each month. Somewhere, someone is burning toast, and I'm wasting as much time as I can at work because even if art is in protest, I'll keep these poems close to me for the moment. We were all born into this balance of circles in delta mouths so tender between meals and floods. How do we lose the presence of trees and pure community of tundra days? Our little bio realms, not nations exactly, but tiny regions, wooded and historical for a time now civilized and property. Every night the earth rewrites this poem. The lacuna of bugs sets in over the forest and I am in bed listening to my neighbor idle his car. So none of these have any titles, so I'm just gonna keep just kind of blowing through them, so yeah, okay. So this has a couple words and inspiration from Wendell Berry. Do you know when in despair you lie down day blind as the world at rest waiting for grief, like water only growing in the afternoon? I feel the beauty of the summer and the rain. I am without forethought mostly, and I am skeptical of ambition or people with quotes in their email signatures. Does the sea try to open, or does it, like a wave, flex and heave with the pulse of the center of matter, infinite and fizzy? Don't you agree it makes sense that the new kind of money is as destructive as this one that you have to mine it to? That nothing exists without extirpation and exhaustion, so I will lie down again in my grief for stars and other small bodies at peace with the light as such, or the celosia in my mother's garden growing for a time. Okay. A question arises from the small beasts living their wild fauna time out of sight, thank God, of me and my compadres, aka conquerors looking though gently for the next hillside view of the city. Yes, I have mellowed my anxieties. For the moment, sulking and spreading lightly my arms around the upturned oak trees killed in a storm I spent the morning waiting for in my apartment, wondering how safe I actually am from the effects of corporations or seed patents. When this is all over, meaning when the days soften, in contrast to the walls bordering migration routes, in contrast to the novel ruins constructed from redwood ash, softly snowing over San Francisco, the fog burnished and burned, know that we could never take enough back to take back the glacier I saw on vacation with my family in Alaska that's no longer there. This one takes some lines and I guess is after Jory Graham, specifically her poem Erosion, if you know that one. Erosion takes time, and in this blue light, I watch the sand marginally entering in and out of the ocean from the blanket with friends drinking beer and frozen margaritas. Time is made this kind of afternoon quickness, tenderly passing along this moment and that one, the way bees or ants discard their dead, which in turn turn to mushrooms or other kinds of detritus, or rather necrophysis, or next year's lady slippers or fiddleheads. Yeah, two more. Okay. In search of migrations. I am mindless, and I am only finding now that in late September, almost fall, gray clouds oscillating in this light over the bridge and the buildings, I will write this eclogue, waiting for Liz to come home from work while I listen to the Grateful Dead, Cocaine Blues, and Little Sadie at my desk. It turns out you can only mourn the sunset so long before the poem becomes more smoke, an opaque veil jittering and placid like nothingness, or hands buried in cool sand and protected for now. The tide, though, is coming, meaning these words, nice as they are fading fast. Like a caribou on the mountainside in search of footing, I stumble often too. And this is the last one, and I'll do another one after another poet, after Frank O'Hara. Maybe some of you will know the lines that I've stolen here. All I want is boundless earth. I am the least difficult man in that way. Lying prostrated, the grasses are talking to me again, explaining the cycle of food, the history of guano mines in South America, the commodification of shit. The sky is vague blue, like the wing of a seagull stroked at a great distance, so that squinting I'm still trying to understand the humility that comes with touch, just the simple expression of green, of leaves, etc. We are never alone in New York, and that's the problem. Everywhere the pastoral, easily beautiful, but nowhere is the pasture. Until I fall to earth, I will not move. Thank you.
All right. It's like we're spared the rain so far. Next reader is Brent Kite, whose writing has appeared in publications including The Believer, Barrow Street, Film Comment, Sight and Sound, and Traffic, as well as the anthologies Exile Cinema and Oliver essays. This is called Disconnected Lines, and it's a sonnet. Never met awe outside of the movies. Can't believe how dumb this story is. Opening elsewhere and really not knowing, so could be to still be something good. Some lightning strike to change the scene, something of an image. Wasn't the way that it wanted to go. Not enough time, too busy sleeping. Access is ended. Please let me try to believe separation a little bit longer. Such bullshit. Thanks. All right, our next reader is Chris Gonzalez. Serves as a fiction editor at powerHouse and a contributing editor at Split Lip. His stories appear or are forthcoming in a number of journals, and he has a book coming out next year.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you all for coming out. I'm going to read the start of a story that's not finished yet called Something So Personal. It's basically if someone were put through the Queer Eye experience, but they didn't want to be. Francisco is sweating his ass off in the kitchen of a pan-Latin restaurant with Queer Eye's Antony. They're going to make a classic Puerto Rican snack, papas rellenas, swapping in cauliflower for the mashed potato exterior. It's not traditional, Antony says, his eyes wide and bulging, manic, but the goal here is to update your favorite foods into something healthier. Francisco spoons ground turkey picadillo onto a flattened round of cauliflower dough while Antony looks on, feral. See, isn't this easy? Francisco smiles for the camera, his whole face a lie. Let's be clear here. Culinary ineptitude isn't the issue. Maybe time, exhaustion. 7 whole months since the bullet passed through him, and he's still limping around the city, grooving at a slower pace. But cooking, he knows. Puerto Rican food? Forget it. He owes much of his childhood weight gain to a gluttonous love of pork skin. The fat on his chest, bowls of beans and rice. His ass, all starch, baby, yuca and fried plantains, not a cauliflower in sight. Antony leans back, places both hands over his heart. You know, he says, sharing food from your culture can be something so personal. Can't you imagine passing these around at a dinner party? No, Francisco says. I can't imagine that at all. It's important to note that Francisco is a fan of the show. He also hates it. Sometimes the world is so heavy the only balm is watching 5 squeaky clean queers smother a soft-spoken individual with affection and compliments as they bathe their insecurities in materialism for a week. Francisco enjoys seeing what money can buy others: clothes, a new haircut, new furniture, and paint on the walls, security deposit be damned, and allegedly a love for life. It's this last part Francisco struggles with, the idea that a week and a pretty new wardrobe are capable of permanently increasing the dopamine in his craggy brain, and that once 5 upsettingly beautiful people departed from his life, things wouldn't return to business as usual. Had he fantasized about appearing on the show? No. It was his best friend Dolian who suggested Francisco would make a great candidate because Francisco works as a roaming music teacher for kindergartners, spends his week slingshotting himself across all 5 boroughs, doing good, honorable work, and maybe the show would see him as someone in need of self-care, self-love, and a $300 suit. But when Francisco remained unconvinced, Dolian, also a PR strategist, suggested the gun. Then he shot Francisco in the groin. Antony was always going to be enemy number 1. From the guacamole incident to the macaroni and cheese, it was clear the show had cast a huckster to fill the role of food and wine expert. Why not take these people grocery shopping, Francisco had wondered, teach them about pantry staples and the best way to store produce so it wouldn't rot before the weekend. Instead, Antony would teach a tired bartender and father of 3 how to make pasta from scratch. In the kitchen now, Antony is talking to Francisco with a calm voice, but it's clear he's annoyed. Are you really against dinner parties? I don't see the point of them, Francisco says. Well, Antony says, that's because you've never hosted one before. This was a losing battle. Francisco smiles again for the cameras, continues rolling the cauliflower dough around filling. He aggressively dusts a ball in cornstarch so the starch goes everywhere. Antony coughs. See? Aren't you having so much fun? Dolian had called the police to report the shooting. After he told Francisco to stay on the floor of his kitchen, after he bust out the window leading to the fire escape, after he took the TV and stashed it in the hallway closet so the cops wouldn't see it when they arrived, that is. This would only help their story, make it seem like Francisco was a victim of circumstance. The show loves that shit. While Dolian rushed around the apartment, Francisco rolled over to his side to relieve his groin of some pressure. He had a clear view of the space beneath the fridge, where the dust mites and roaches left to tango, and made eye contact with a beady-eyed mouse, gray and wet, panting. The gunshot had been loud and must have disturbed the balance of his apartment, sending every organism into a tizzy, but that was the thing. He was on the cusp of change, wasn't he? And change was never quiet. I'm in fucking pain here, Francisco yelled. Okay, I'm about to call them. From this angle, Dolian appeared above Francisco like a godly being, the kitchen light his halo. He trusted Dolian with his world, never once questioned him. He always believed in his heart he might take a bullet for Dolian if the moment ever arrived. What should it matter if the bullet came from Dolian's gun? Thank you.
Our next reader is Anya Meeks, and Nifas Chaudhry will read for her. Anya Meeks is a writer from Kingston, Jamaica. She completed her MFA in fiction at Columbia University in 2019. Currently, she's a PhD student in English at Duke University, where she balances her critical interest in Caribbean folklore and speculative fiction with her creative projects. She's at work on a novel called Sisterhood. Nifas?
Thank you all for coming, and thank you, Anya, for trusting me to read your piece. This is called Discoveries. I did a handstand against the wall. The shock of being upside down meant my feet kicked uselessly in the air and I fell over. When I got up, hundreds of little floating lights squirmed in my vision, dissolving softly into white. I've started checking up on my friends on Animal Crossing. If they are online and they text me back, I know that they want to talk to me. If they are online and do not text me back, it must mean that they are playing very hard. Alternatively, I am not interesting or important enough to stop them from watering their plants, uprooting their trees, hitting their villagers on the heads with their nets. They call them villagers because you are master of the island. It is yours to colonize in all of its newness and beauty. I am very susceptible to online marketing. You can market shoes to me and clothing and makeup. I perused $1,200 diamond necklaces sold only for $700, direct to consumer, once the middleman is cut out. I marvel that jewelry is so highly marked up that I am getting such a good deal. Fuck the middleman, all these glittery white diamonds finally at the right cost. There is a woman I know who posts a throwback picture on Facebook from when she was pregnant with her husband's child. It is captioned, "Prego days in my favorite city, so in love with this man." I remember when I first met the husband, he was ugly and old. I thought she married him a very long time ago and was ready to leave him, just desperate, yearning for something better. My mother insists that I will want to find a partner someday. She says that it is just a matter of time. Thinking a lot about the boy who I went to undergrad with, whose brother was a reporter for the New York Times. He had recently been to Syria to cover what was going on over there and had won a Pulitzer for his reporting. That should have been enough, but he was also very handsome, fine-boned with a pouty mouth. His brother, who I knew, was short and balding. There was nothing redeemable about him, not really, but he still thought he was something. I set an alarm. Each day I snooze, snooze, snooze. I plan to go to early, but every night I am late. My body knows it will steal those little minutes in the morning. One morning I am woken right before my alarm rings, and I'm filled with dread. I try to close my eyes, but I can't go back to sleep. I'm desperate for those 27 minutes of snooze. I spend that day in a fog, a crushing upset to my routine. I don't know when I will stop being jealous of my friends. It doesn't matter what it's for. It could be anything. My friends are better writers than me, better lovers, better thinkers, better looking, better friends to me than I could ever be to them. If I were better, I could use their betterness to fuel me. I could study them, breathe them into my body, gobble up their good advice, their silky soft hair, their thoughtfulness and skill. Instead, I feel like my body metabolizes their goodness into bad, or maybe it's better to say it metastasizes what little good I do soak up, all my cells poisoning the unknown intruder, the liar, the falsehood. For several days, I thought that I had bed bugs. Slithering little creatures swarmed my body. I woke up with lesions on my skin, small red bumps with a pinprick of blood at the surface. I Googled the bites and they didn't look like bed bug bumps, although I was unable to find pictures of the bites on dark skin. But where would the bed bugs have come from? I haven't left the house, not in months, not in a very long time. And when I looked closely, there were no bugs, no bed bugs at all. I changed my sheets, I changed my skincare, I washed my sheets in different detergent, I washed my legs, I didn't wash my legs, I shaved my hairy legs, and this was what made the difference. The feeling of bed bugs on my skin left me. But why did I have those scratches? I'm in this one class about Black people where there are only 2 other Black people, including the professor. Each week, 2 white grad students lead discussion on the Black books we read. Their faces are moon-like and opalescent. They ask questions and large frothy gaps of silence flood the online space. Zoom has that effect of turning us all into bloated buoys bobbing in a blank sea together. When I speak, everyone mutes themselves. My own face transfixes me. I can't stop staring. Who knew that my jaw moved like that when I spoke? Was no one going to tell me that my face made a mockery of symmetry? I finished the thought, put myself back on mute. Those disembodied, silent heads nodding along enthusiastically, again. My favorite internet meme has the text, "Nature is healing," below a seemingly unrelated image. I can't go into this anymore because then it won't be funny. There's a David Attenborough documentary on Netflix that reminds us that planet conservation is not about saving the planet, it's about saving humankind. Since I turned 25, there has not been one single day where I haven't thought about dying. My therapist says dying is the most natural thing you can do. I don't want to die. Maybe that is the most human thing about me, the most human thing in the world. I'm disgusted with how much I think of myself. I wish I were foam on the crest on a wave. I wish I had no money to spend, and thus I spent no money. I wish I were the column of a throat, a stopgap for pre-chewed food. I wish I were the skinniest girl you know. I wish I were the prettiest. I wish I were successful in the ways that meant something to me as a child. I wish I were alone again. Thank you.
Our next reader is Chris Molnar. Chris is an author, co-founder of the Writer's Block bookstore in Las Vegas, and editorial director of Archway Editions. Chris.
Hello. I'm going to read a little bit from a novel that I'm working on. The model Nell Theobald had been mauled by a lion at the 1966 International Automobile Show in Queens, said the music critic John Corbett. There were photos on the cover of the New York Times, lawsuits changed workers' comp policies. Afterwards, she stalked the opera singer Brigitte Nielsen, using her settlement money, until dying under cloudy circumstances from an overdose of barbiturates in 1977. Corbett was giving a talk on his latest book, a collection of personal essays about the music of the 1970s, the typical gamut of canonized mainstream and underground rock, avant-garde and free jazz, with just the one on opera. He had a small empire in Chicago of experimental jazz and classical concerts, labels, classes, writers, musicians, as well as the devastating misfortune to share a name with a semi-notable romantic actor. It was pre-plague, post-recession. I was selling books and running events for a bookstore in downtown Brooklyn. The store was sparsely filled with a peculiar breed of aging rock nerd, useless in their specialty like carriage horses, each with biting, direct questions about chronology and cocaine-era Miles Davis studio dates. Over the gently contentious drone of the Q&A, I looked in the book at his essay about Nell Theobald. It began, the cover of Wagner's Salome leered at me, a recording from 1970 that no one ever bought. the reactionaries who listened to opera generally purchasing their music through mail order. Birgit Nielsen is hideously lit, garishly made up on the cover. Nell Theobald at that moment in the late summer of 1977 was distributing presents to her friends, the final disbursement of the settlement she'd received being mauled by an improperly tranquilized lion holed up in a suite in Midtown Manhattan. It continued. She died. She represented something about the final death of mid-century culture, a few pages maximum. Books were sold and the rest of the audience malingered. I asked Corbett about the essay, if he knew more. And the publisher insisted on a classical chapter. Baby boomers are the ones that still buy books. I congratulated him and told him the turnout was wonderful. It really wasn't bad for someone from Chicago. Nielsen's papers are at NYU if you're curious, he told me. And the next day, I talked my way into a day pass. Birgit Nielsen's materials took up one overstuffed wire rack, a life boiled down to semi-archival cardboard, lightly identified with tape and yellowed photos. Her memoir, La Nielsen, also resided in the archives, handwritten in Swedish and typed in English translation with her notes a variety of colors. The end box contained the Theobald letters, evenly organized by an executor or librarian, undated, but in some kind of order. Eating lunch in Washington Square, I watched videos of Birgit on my phone, always in control, on minimalist mid-century sets, stout, blonde, precisely made up, a professional. I couldn't hear anything distinctive, my ears attuned to novelty as opposed to perfection. There wasn't any footage of Nell anywhere, just photos, her smiling next to Ludwig the lion, then obscured by the crowd, face contorted from the pain, and screaming as Ludwig gnaws away, although all you can see is his large paw draped over her thigh, seemingly limp in the matter of big cats, almost loving. A yearbook photo where she somehow looks older, austere in the way of schools then, lips set, brown hair up, face giving nothing away. The few photos afterwards are mostly her identified in crowds, a shrouded figure with dark glasses to the side of or behind Birgit Nielsen. Model confidence gone, unrecognizable almost, no longer play acting desirability, but becoming something else. What I couldn't tell. I dreamt that night about opera, which struck me particularly as I'd never liked it before or even now, listening to Birgit Nielsen over and over, trying to get lost in the spooky interludes of Tristan, to envision the sanctity of the opera house. My mind would wander and I couldn't pretend to understand. But dreaming, there I was in an enormous opera house, one in Mexico City that I'd seen years before in a documentary, more imposing in its austerity and elegance as it towered over ancient ruined temples and cheap electronics bazaars, teeming masses and dark crowded bookstores. The stage was dark, and in the cavernous space I could see real sky and trees painted in shadows. Cool air drifted from the balconies, almost with the chill of real wind. I could see a figure like the one in the photograph where he hunched to the side of Nell. I could see him here in the wings, suit sharp, black on black, bent in the middle as if to pounce. I knew Nell was in the back, and that unshakable dream certainty about to sing. I was afraid that she wouldn't be able to, well or at all. Between flashes of dream life, the hall filled and emptied. Mexico City flickered through the centuries outside, the ruined temple museum rising and falling in greatness. Nell's face hypnotic, single-minded, staring at a single point. And of course, a figure next to her bent slightly out of frame.
Our next reader is Arash Azizi. Arash is a writer and scholar based in New York City. He is the author of the upcoming book, The Shadow Commander, Soleimani, the US and Iran Global Ambitions. Arash.
So now that we have published in this spirit of unpublishability, hopefully we can keep pushing to write things that are ever more unpublishable. So I thought I'll do a performance art of just reading The Economist, but decided otherwise. November 9th, 2012, 6:30 p.m. Pearson Airport. I have now intended for a while to start a new diary, to write my thoughts on things, to write what happens, to capture the moment. I've always had problems with writing for no audience, the philosophical foundation of it always bugging me somewhat. But I believe the advantages of this, if not immediately enumerable, are quite self-evident. So we shall proceed and do it. Promise to, no matter how tired, get behind this once in a while and jot down a few lines in English of all languages. How strange it feels when one writes to oneself in this decidedly non-mother tongue language. I will write in Persian too, but it's not bad to practice writing in the world's like it or leave it lingua franca. What a chilling feeling it is, and how much I love it when I write from airports, the hubs of my life. And I know what I just said on Facebook, which I, by the way, also love to log into while in an airport, is largely true and not a mere gimmick or ada, that I do feel at home in airports in a strange way. 6th of April 2016, 6:27 p.m. Eastern Time, in a Chicago-Berlin Air Berlin flight over Quebec. I just finished on the road. Everything aside, experience of reading it so fast and as avant-garde as possible was exhilarating. Read it first in the upstairs room of the City Lights, just where I bought it, and then for a couple of hours at the Cafe Vesuvio opposite the road, and then on buses and trains and planes until it ended now. Let it sink before you talk about it. Although that general criticism we have of this post-Hemingway male writers stands, one needs a new wave. Realism needs to be over. My own model is Junot Diaz. But this reminds you that you gotta sweat, you gotta struggle for real. Struggle for real. You gotta read, more concentrated and less distracted, and then you gotta write. They'll tell you that I'm loving life at the moment. I shot it so over the Golden Gate Bridge. Being on the road and busy with books and thoughts of writing makes me happy. Now I have to do the actual writing. This frustrating struggle will bear fruit, I'm sure. My last day in Frisco turned out to be the longest I've ever walked since the records began. 24.5 kilometers, a couple more than my previous record in Cairo. I left Ala's home late and walked to California Avenue Station half an hour, got the train to Frisco, slept most of the way, and then walked around familiar paths in Frisco as opposed to going to new ones. It was a bit mad. I had felt sick in the morning and was in shambles by the time I got off the train in Frisco. So I hit a coffee shop and sat down to a cup of Pete's Best coffee, which made me feel better. Then random trolling around, which ended up with me having a late lunch in a cafe in Chinatown, rice with barbecue pork and beef stripes, and then a mad dart without a stop toward the Golden Gate Bridge. Oh, how many sunny patches of beach and park and grass I saw, and how tempting it was to stop there and read or write or chill or whatever. But I knew that if I did that, I'd never get to GGB before the sun comes down. So I raced with the sun and made it. Along the way, I came up with an idea, which I don't know why I hadn't thought of before, to publish a book in Persian of my writings on Canada. We'll see. What a beauty of walking on all that sand and going up and down those trails, historic forts, and finally stepping onto the bridge and watching the sunlight on it. To my surprise, it was open to walkers, and walk I did, all the way north to the Marin County. Lack of phone made me realize I don't know how far I can go into the jungle of the north, so I walked straight back. A couple of hours of going over the Golden Gate Bridge both ways. It's hard to speak, it's hard to talk of what I want to talk. These pages are something, but the stories will be different. It's hard to be genuine and speak. It's hard to ward off pretension. I don't want to repeat cliche and speak obvious things here. I don't want a style that's too chirpy and shit. But yeah, I love being on the road. I love being on the go. That's a constant that has never changed. If only I could be ever more drastically on the road, if I could live on the back of a caravan, if I had no permanent place and just moved from one place to the other, that day might come. The world is big enough, if also quite small. Let's see what the plains of Eastern Europe have waiting. It's good to be free and on the road. February 21st, 2018, 7:36 a.m. New York time, Moscow, New York flight, Aeroflot, seat 29A. I am tired and fed up and worried and cooped up in a window chair, hoping I won't have to go to the loo before this flight is over and a good few hours are left, but all is under control. The nastiest form of jet lag ever known to man has hit me in the last few days. I look with envy to people who sleep, like the Russian woman sitting next to me, who also deserves envy because her petite body can easily fit in the chair. How many nights have I not slept for? Let's not keep counts. Quite a few. I rented a little box in the Moscow airport to sleep for a few hours and nothing. Have I been robbed of the ability to sleep forever? Will I go mad with the endless night? Will I have to rely on pills regularly? I'm buying some as soon as we hit JFK. Will my eyes be gouged out? They are already swollen. These are all unnecessary dramatization. I yawn as I write this. I'll focus on the immediate for now, how to spend the next 48 hours. I saw a French movie that I started skeptically, some like it veiled, and was prepared to jettison a few times while watching, but I have to admit it was pretty good at the end. It's next to impossible to make an unproblematic comedy about the jihadi in France stopping his sister from seeing an Iranian guy who takes a veil in a burqa to discreetly see the girl but becomes the object of the jihadi's fascination from behind the veil. but it used some very good element. Communist Iranians and Arabs, and the identity of Arabs never becomes clear, although the good Islam, Rumi et al., the good Islam, the link of jihadism to social issues. Not for the first time I saw a film that was similar to the screenplay I wanted to write and never did. Not gonna start moaning about that. The last entry. August 7, 2018, 9:02 p.m., Setverak restaurant by the Danube, Belgrade. Sitting in a fish restaurant by the Danube after a pleasant day that had you visit the house of a great writer and a charming village in which you climbed the tower and had beer in the tavern by his side. Sounds like a dream, doesn't it? But as I was walking down the Danube, trying to pick a place to sit in, Anita having just left me after a quarrel, it sounded like a miserable moment, an ironically miserable moment. All this beauty, but no one to enjoy it with genre. But the truth is that I don't feel half as morose as this line suggests, just a good on my own feeling, which is something of a relief actually. I'm actually enjoying the carbonated water and looking forward to the fish soup and the local perch. Not that I'm not full of thoughts.
Our next reader is Eitan Nechin. Eitan Nechin is a writer and online editor of the Bare Life Review, a journal of immigrant and refugee literature. His writing was published in Boston Review, Ziziva, World Literature Today, the Brooklyn Rail, the Independent, Apogee, Washington Post, and more.
I decided to be the shortest piece because I'm cold. So this is called, As Far as the Rhythm was concerned, we could hold our own. None of us joined the army. It wasn't because we were scared or any had more qualms about joining, but it was simply that we had good things going with our music. Nobody ever did not join the army. It wasn't something that never happened before. Everybody did in the army. Their fathers and mothers and our fathers and mothers, their brothers and sisters and our brothers and sisters. All the others joined. We could have served our time in the army band, they told us, marched through the desert with our dusty instrument, played a march or an old folk song that would make them feel nostalgic, one about conquering the desert with the sound of the flute. But we didn't care for that type of music. We wanted to play music that was our own. As weeks went by, those who went to the army talked to us less and less. They formed a circle communicating in a language full of code and abbreviations that was foreign to us, that sounded like static. Our rehearsal studio was in an old bomb shelter. It had the type of acoustics we were looking for, hollow and deep. And we would sit and play our music all through the day and night, working on it, keeping it tight, following each other until we were in sync, until we didn't need to speak anymore. When we were let go of the army, we went to work as dishwashers to save money, so we could buy instruments that nobody from where we are had heard before. Instruments made of clay and maple and mother of pearl, antique and fishbone and glass. And we learned to play music from places we've never been before. Those who went to the army went places, we heard, to deserts that offered no sounds, on seas that splashed silence. No place was ours except for the bomb shelter. We slept there, ate there, washed dishes there, and played our music there. But then they came knocking on the heavy iron door and asked us to turn it down because they just returned from 2 weeks out in the desert and they were tired. It was just too loud for them, they said, even though they carried sand in their ears and we muffled our drums with buckets of white sand. We thought of telling them off, but instead we nodded and shut down the reinforced steel windows and brought sand back to seal the iron door. And we picked our instruments and played all night and all day until there was no oxygen left in the room, which made the sound travel slower and slower. And the music slowed down so much that it stood still, a cloud of white dust. And we walked to the middle of the studio, holding our breath, and we extended our hands to touch this cloud of sound. And as we touched it, it made a sound, so we started to play on it, all of us together, passing it between us, pushing it from side to side, from one side of the studio to the other, making our music in a pitch only we could hear on an instrument nobody has ever seen or heard before. Thank you.
Thank you, Eitan. Everybody get hot cider if you haven't yet. It's much colder today than it was yesterday. We'll have books for sale, and let me introduce our last reader. Gabriel Cruz is a New Mexican poet and educator writing and living in Brooklyn. He's the co-founder of Wendy's Subway Reading Room, and his book, Acid Virga, is coming out from Archway Editions in less than a month. Okay.
We don't have a field. I just want it to smell like lavender. That's the thing that's important to me. So I'm also reading relatively unpublishable work, things that actually at least haven't been published before. I just, want to quickly thank everyone who came out on this very cold day to read, and thank you to the publishers of Unpublishable, as much of an oxymoron as that is. All right, this poem is called Asbestolith. You could write your poems in gold, or you could write them in shit. Either way, it couldn't mean less. Better to leave the page how you found it. You're no Nicanor Para. This poem is called Asbestolith. You're no Wiener either. No Coolidge, Miles, or Mayer. Not Notley, Waldman, nor Giorno. No Zurita, Vicuña, Guijar, Valerie, Rochefort, or Villon. It's not like you're Pizarnik, Lecomte, or Artaud, Baudelaire, Rattray, Ginsberg, Killian, or Ward. Not Card, White or Brown, Ricard, Lasky, Heinowitz, Rubin, Papascaro, Zhang, or Zamazik. No Baraka, Kaplan, Mohammed, Lord, Spot, Loy, or Riding. Longabuco, Madero, Tamayo, or Conrad. Not Berrigan, nor Berrigan. Not Dlugos, nor Boyer. Not Salas, Rivera, Talamantes, Brolaski, or Rains. You're certainly no Schuyler. You're not even Kenneth Koch. But you can't keep living your life in this so-called apophatic mode, taking an exacto to the things of this world. You have to say something for once as if it's your own. This poem is called Asbestolith. I want to be there when David's ankles break and his Carrarran bulk calves from the pediment, all those vectors for fracture expressed with force across the travertine floor. This poem's called Asbestolith. By the road to the wastewater treatment plant, under atmospheric rivers of yeast from the Sirena bakery and the weekend's vinegars of waste bin ferment driven on warm southeasterly breezes. Beyond the wan, watery scent of shit in tin domes like citrus juicers, its industrial tiles, dual-toned, if semi-precious, in lapis, jasper, carnelian, and ivory. Standing mineral green above pools of standing water, reflecting its faceted font, faded yet obdurate, established, unchanged since 1895. The everlasting purveyor of Dexotex slip-proof, flame-retardant flooring composed of short fiber asbestos, best fit for battle cruisers, kill room floors, and the Freedom Tower's observation decks. Emblem of the insalubrious valley where, further down the potholed street, beneath a fathom of slack water, pea green, nearly opaque, lies a fatty naphtha of the last century's industrial runoff, wavering in a loose cloud on the jelly surface of whale tallow. All against all, 10,000 Leviathan rendered to extinction for their baleen, fat, and ambergris. And that's where you'll have to go to dip your quill if these poems you've been writing are to mean anything at all. This poem's also, it's called Asbestolith. And the epigraph is, i.e. the bar was so low and desire so brutal, from a poem by Joey Uris Algonzin. Who made the atmosphere? Who poured the foundation? Who oiled, lubed the machines, tested the longevity of this linoleum I'm staring past my book into, half reading Justice Peace Transmission, waiting for the judge and his attendants to work through various technical difficulties. My head, a shadow hung over the halogenated grease gray halo behind the silhouette reflected in the courthouse floor. There is for some reason a terrible droning all through the proceedings every time we're here, deep in the heart of the building behind the faux wood veneer. If I take these all as signs, they are of that mundane and so too real category that means everything, a metaphor coextensive with reality. The cornball jokes the lawyer makes defending the murderer, talking about what a crazy place New York must be and how one of the things you might see is a killer with blood still on his hands, walking half naked in the street. Looking at him now, his beard, his skull under his hair combed flat, seems somehow too apparent. It reminds me of Raskolnikov's skull in the PBS version of Crime and Punishment I watched in high school. You could practically smell the spirit glue coming off the VHS. What could he have wanted? It can't have been this. I used to know the names phrenologists use for different kinds of skulls. I read about it in the history of white people, how Emerson and Carlyle, pitifully ill their whole lives, pale, wan things like sticks, were co-architects of racecraft in the West. Teutonic ideologues, their ancestors, the Scythians, along with pioneering mustaches and taming horses, used human scalps for cups, keeping the hair intact to serve as a kind of napkin. The only justice I've ever seen served has been quote unquote poetic, but no one tells you these things, these invisible histories, what the droning in the walls might be. We can't help but breathe them in. We lead each other about, one asleep completely and the other almost. Even Para shook Pat Nixon's hand, while Stein on her lecture tour found beautiful the spectacle in Chicago of starving couples competing for money in a literal danse macabre. Sometimes they went on for weeks, these depression entertainments, until all the couples had collapsed. And Whitman, though he found slavery abhorrent, called his black countrymen baboons. And yet you still prefer to remember him as you knew him, singing not a song of abnegation, but in a small mansion in New Jersey, his enfeebled hand making the most unearthly and most beautiful movement you've ever seen, dipping on his deathbed stale crusts of bread into a cup of champagne. That's true. When Whitman was dying, he dipped crusts of bread into champagne. It's kind of a beautiful image. This poem is also called Asbestolith. Waiting 2 hours online for my ermine stole, my scepter and crown, my orb and my throne. So beautiful, the tragic tired dancers, their stilted dance. These depression entertainments, sometimes they go on for weeks. This one's called Asbestolith. The closest thing I've felt to yearning in a long time was on the way here when 2 blocks later, I was still wistfully imagining gently nudging the yuppie on his city bike with his AirPods into a bank of city bikes as I biked by. And now I'm gonna switch gears and read poems that aren't called Asbestolith, just two or three. This one is actually in the book, but it's never been published. So its first publication will be on November 17 when Acid Virga comes out. So look for it there if this interests you, if it catches your fancy. All right, Kalpa. A lunar smudge on the horizon's edge, an angel in rags traipsing the void, and the stars dispersed. Like the crystal ramparts she's brushed down to dust with the hem of her once silken robes. The mountaintop floating up beneath me erodes at the rate it rises, and the river that winds like a brass wire below divides the massif in two. From this side of the divide, I want to speak not in pure language, but of pure duration, to ask What's Catabasis, and where'll your honeymoon be if the sky's an oasis no longer but an inferno? If you're still out there waiting like La Llorona or Hagar even, with mouth upturned, aphasic with thirst, in the shadow of a cloud that can't make its rain reach the riverbed they evaporate above. And then continuing on with this theme of angels, this is another poem about angels. It's called Crack-a-Lure, which is like the kind of shattering that happens to tempera paint as it ages. Harder, heavier than any element, at what speed does the angel arrive? Her cold skin ringing the ozone like a bell, as if, as she emerges from the ether, she has shattered the very air around her. And this one's called The Wife of Peter Obolon, and these are both ekphrastic poems, that one and this one, and this one is about a photograph that August Saunders took, who was a German photographer right before World War II. Teeth set to grind that cigarette to dust, taut in jaw and frame, their slick back hair, black belt, thin tie, bones tender, eyes, lips, slow, thighs, boyish, hips, edging tensed toward effigy, standing like sulfur and striker in workman's clothes, a cold flame above the studio floor, one eye heavy on the work of his hands, the other hard on the future. And this one is the last poem I'll read, and it's also called Asbestolith. Asbestolith. Back in the thick of it, learning to read the thorn for what it is. If there was a word more all-encompassing than revolution, we would use it. Like how to absolutely erase every inch of history. Tear it out, it won't degrade. How it inflames the nerves down to the root. The earth upturned in the act. I still feel the tread, the pattern the cop's boot left on my neck. When it all comes to an end, I'd like to be one of the ones helping to send the big golden curtain switching shut across the stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabe. Thank you, everybody who read. Thank you, everybody who came out on this cold day. Thank you, everybody who tuned in on Zoom. You can buy the book on the event page, and we have copies of the book for sale here. Should be more hot cider, I think. Thank you.